Hand over the keys. Mom, my daughter-in-law said, as if my home were already just a line item on her moving checklist. She had no idea I didn't need to raise my voice to change everything. Just hand over the keys. Mom, that way we won't have to hunt for them later. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, said before she'd even dropped her purse on the entryway table. Right then, on a completely ordinary Tuesday afternoon, it hit me the quiet life I'd built in my own home was in serious jeopardy. My son, Austin, just stood there behind her, staring blankly at his phone like none of this had anything to do with him. Chloe didn't even wait for me to answer. She marched right past me into my living room with these quick, proprietary strides. She looked around, ran a finger over the sideboard, and nodded. Like a realtor inspecting a property she'd already closed on, I stayed right there in the hallway, hands buried in the pockets of my cardigan, watching the whole thing unfold with a mix of surprise and total clarity. Ever since my husband passed away 3 years ago, I'd been living alone in this suburban ranch-style home just outside of Atlanta, a place we'd spent decades scraping by to pay off. It was my sanctuary, but to Chloe, it was clearly just some free real estate waiting to be optimized. She turned back to face me, a plastic smile plastered on her lips that didn't quite reach her cold eyes. We've thought this through, she went on, gesturing toward the large guest bedroom downstairs. Austin and I are moving in next month. It'll save us the $2,200 a month we're throwing away on our 2-bedroom apartment. Plus, you won't be so lonely out here. You can just move your things up to the small bonus room over the garage. It's plenty of space for one person. Austin nodded on cue, still avoiding my gaze. Chloe was already mapping out the floor plan, casually mentioning which days I'd be expected to cook for the family and handle the laundry. She had it all figured out, except for one minor detail, my absolute refusal to be downgraded to a tenant in my own home. I managed a tight smile, knowing exactly what my next move had to be. I'll have to think about that, I said, keeping my voice low and steady just to de-escalate things and buy myself some time. Chloe took my hesitation as a green light. Her smile widened, turning almost triumphant, and she immediately started talking logistics as if the ink were already dry on the deal. Austin looked visibly relieved that a massive screaming match hadn't broken out. He pulled out a chair at the kitchen island and asked if we had any fresh coffee. I brewed a pot, served it without saying much, and patiently listened to their grand vision for remodeling my house over the next few weeks. Once they finally headed home that evening, I sat at the kitchen counter for a long time, soaking in the quiet that they were planning to strip away. I knew talking sense into Chloe was a lost cause. She was the type of person who only respected facts on the ground. The next morning, I got up early, had my tea, and immediately called a local locksmith a friend had recommended. Before lunch, a guy named Dave was standing in my hallway with a heavy toolbox and a row of brand new deadbolts. We walked through the house together, and I had him install heavy-duty, smart key locks on every essential door. My home office, my bedroom, and even the basement door got their own individual locks that only I could open. I went outside and retrieved the old spare key I'd kept hidden under a planter on the back porch for emergencies, slipping it into my pocket. When Dave finished up, and I paid him cash, a real sense of security washed over me for the first time since yesterday. I had built the first invisible walls, but that was just the baseline of my plan. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a text from Austin, signaling the next wave. Austin's text said they wanted to drop off the first batch of moving boxes this coming Saturday to store them in the basement. I typed back a brief, matter-of-fact reply. Saturday doesn't work for me. I have plans. Please hold off. I didn't bother waiting for the inevitable complaint from Chloe. Instead, I grabbed my keys and drove downtown to my bank. I had an appointment with Mr. Vance, my longtime financial advisor who had looked after my accounts since my husband's passing. I asked him to immediately liquidate the joint savings account I'd set up years ago for Austin to use for emergencies. The funds had come entirely from my own nest egg, But I'd given Austin signing privileges so he'd have a safety net. I transferred every cent into a brand new, completely private account at a different bank down the street, one where nobody but me could touch it. Next, I canceled the automatic monthly transfer of $350 I'd been sending Austin since his college days to help cover his car insurance. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a gift, not a birthright. And that gift expired today. When I pulled back into my driveway later that afternoon, I saw my son's sedan already parked there. Chloe was in the passenger seat, furiously texting on her phone. While Austin stood on the front porch, looking bewildered. He'd obviously tried using his old key and realized the cylinder had been completely changed. I parked, stepped out calmly, and walked up the path carrying my grocery bags. Chloe rolled down her window, her face pure ice, ready to lay into me for the inconvenience. But I didn't give her the satisfaction of an argument. I just gestured for them to follow me inside. "What's the deal with the new locks?" Mom Austin asked the second we stepped into the foyer, clearly feeling the heat from his wife standing right behind him. My key didn't work, and we just wanted to stack a few things downstairs. I set the groceries on the counter, unhurriedly putting away the cheese and bread before turning around. The old lock was sticking for weeks. I lied smoothly, looking him dead in the eye. I had it replaced for peace of mind, since I'm tied up today. "We can go over the basement layout sometime next week." Chloe pushed past Austin into the kitchen, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "We don't have time for next week. We're coordinating a whole move here. And you're stalling everything over a door lock. Just give us the new code or a spare key. And we won't get in your hair." I looked at her, offered a polite nod, and slowly shook my head. "No, Chloe, this is my house, and the keys stay with me. You're welcome to bring your boxes over when I'm home and have the time to help you." Chloe let out a sharp scoff, grabbed her designer bag, and gave Austin a look that signaled the conversation was over. On her way out, she threw over her shoulder that I was being completely unreasonable, that family was supposed to have each other's backs. Later that night, Austin called me back, this time without Chloe breathing down his neck. His voice sounded shaky and stressed. He asked about the savings account, saying he'd gotten an error message on his banking app when he tried to clear a payment. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my voice completely level as I told him the truth. "The account is closed." "Austin," I said over the line, pouring myself a cup of chamomile tea. "I moved those funds into a different investment portfolio. I have to look out for my own expenses down the road." A heavy, suffocating silence stretched over the phone. All I could hear was my son's ragged breathing. "But Mom, we already budgeted that money for the new living room set when we move in." He stammered out finally. "You should have run that by us." Chloe already put down a non-refundable deposit on a custom sectional. "The money belongs to me, Austin, and I don't need anyone's permission to manage my finances," I replied firmly. "If you two are buying furniture, it needs to come out of your own paychecks, like any other adults, without giving him room to backtrack or make excuses." I wished him a good night and hung up. Over the next few days, the silence from their end was deafening. Neither Austin nor Chloe reached out, which gave me the exact window of opportunity I needed. I used the downtime to meet with a local real estate agent who came highly recommended through a neighbor. Sarah was a consummate professional who grasped my situation instantly without me having to lay out all my family laundry. We did a walkthrough of the property. She took some initial photos, and she gave me a solid estimate of the current rental market. Her assessment was incredibly reassuring. The house was pristine, located in a highly rated school district, and would easily attract high-quality tenants. Right there, I signed an exclusive agreement to list the entire property for a long-term lease starting the month after next. It was a massive pivot. But for the first time in years, I felt a wave of absolute freedom. Friends, many of you have been with quiet revenge for months, and some for years. We are deeply grateful for your encouragement, comments, and support. We believe meaningful stories deserve thoughtful care, although AI tools may help with certain creative tasks. Every story is carefully chosen, edited, reviewed, and produced by our team before publication. At the moment, our YouTube monetization is not active, so viewer support helps us continue sharing the stories that bring this community together. If you would like to help, even the cost of a small cup of coffee can make a difference. Patreon https://www.patreon.com/quiet-revenge-family. Coffee https://go-fi.com/history-family. PayPal https://www.paypal.com/paypal Thank you for helping Quiet Revenge remain a place where stories of courage, family, and quiet strength can continue to be heard. The following Saturday morning, Austin and Chloe showed up unannounced again, this time with a 15-foot U-Haul truck. They hadn't bothered to ask if it was convenient. They just took for granted that I'd cave under the pressure. Chloe climbed down from the cab holding a clipboard, shouting at Austin to start unloading the heavy crates straight into the main hallway. I unlocked the front door, but stood squarely on the threshold, completely blocking the entrance. What exactly is going on here? I asked evenly, looking past them at the massive orange truck taking up my entire driveway. Chloe walked up the path with that familiar, patronizing grin, holding a piece of paper up to my face. This is the master room layout I put together so we don't waste time. We're getting the living room situated today. I didn't reach for the paper. I just stared at her in silence until her grin withered away, replaced by deep irritation. I told you last week that this Saturday wouldn't work and that I wasn't ready to store your things, I said, keeping my composure. Austin set a heavy plastic tote down on the walkway and wiped his forehead, looking completely trapped. But Mom, we rented the truck for the day. We can't just drive it back full, he pleaded. Then you should have coordinated with me first instead of making decisions about my home without me. I countered coldly. Chloe finally snapped, taking a step toward me, threatening that if I kept acting like this, they just wouldn't move in at all. It was the exact opening I'd been waiting for, and I didn't hesitate. If that's what you want, I'll respect your choice. I told Chloe. I took a step back into the foyer and firmly closed the heavy oak door right in their faces. I heard Chloe furiously pounding on the wood outside, her voice muffled as she started yelling at Austin for standing there and doing nothing. After a few agonizing minutes, the truck's engine roared to life, and I watched through the window as they peeled out of the driveway. I took a deep breath, walked over to the kitchen island, and pulled out the paperwork Sarah had messaged over the night before. It was a fully executed lease agreement for my house. A wonderful young couple with 2 toddlers, desperate to get into the school district, had jumped at the listing and signed it immediately. They were paying a premium rent that, combined with my Social Security, would give me a very comfortable lifestyle. I signed the landlord portion of the document, scanned it back to Sarah, and felt a weight lift from my shoulders. An hour later, I drove over to a quiet, upscale leasing office downtown to pick up the keys to my own new place. I'd rented a lovely 2-bedroom apartment in a vibrant, walkable neighborhood completely maintenance-free, with a spacious balcony overlooking a courtyard park. No one in my family had a clue, and I intended to keep it that way until the move was a done deal. That evening, I started packing my personal belongings, the old photo albums, and the mementos of my husband into small boxes. I donated bags of things I no longer needed, feeling lighter with every box I taped shut. The next morning, I texted Austin an invitation to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown to settle things once and for all. The bistro was bustling and crowded, a deliberate choice on my part. It was a neutral public space where Chloe would be forced to keep her temper in check to avoid making a public spectacle. They sat across from me at the booth, Chloe with her arms locked tightly across her chest and a scowl on her face. Austin fidgeting with his napkin, trying to ignore the palpable tension. We ordered our meals, and I kept the conversation light, chatting about the weather as if the past month had been completely smooth sailing. Chloe couldn't take it anymore. She tapped her knuckles against the table, cutting me off mid-sentence. "Let's get to the point," she said sharply. "Our lease is up in 2 weeks, and our current landlord already has new tenants moving in. When are we getting the keys to the house?" I took a slow sip of my water, dabbed my mouth with a napkin, and looked at both of them. "You aren't getting the keys, Chloe." "Because you aren't moving into my house," I said, keeping my tone completely conversational. Austin froze with his fork halfway to his mouth. The color drained from Chloe's face, and she stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "What do you mean? Our apartment is gone. We're going to be homeless," she hissed, doing her best to keep her voice down so the surrounding tables wouldn't hear. "That was a choice you made without a signed agreement from me." I explained reasonably, without a hint of anger. "I've leased the house to a lovely family. The contract is finalized, legally binding, and their move-in date is in 6 weeks. Chloe's mouth hung open. She tried to find something to say, but my practical, decisive move had left her completely defenseless. Austin's face flushed a deep red as he looked from his wife back to me, the reality of their situation finally breaking through his denial. "But Mom, where are we supposed to go? You can't just cut us loose like this. We're your family," he said, his voice cracking with panic. "You're both capable adults, Austin, and you both make good money," I replied smoothly as our entrees arrived, though none of us had an appetite anymore. "You'll find a place to rent, just like anyone else navigating the market." Chloe managed to pull herself together, her eyes flashing with pure malice as she lobbed one final, desperate threat. "If you go through with this, I swear you will never see your future grandkids. Mark my words," she spat out. I didn't let the emotional blackmail faze me for a second. I just looked at her with a calm, pitying smile. "That's your choice to make, Chloe. But I am done letting people manipulate or bully me in my own life." I placed enough cash on the table to cover my share of the bill, stood up unhurriedly, slipped on my jacket, and looked down at my son one last time, for what it's worth. "I'm moving into my new apartment downtown this weekend, and the house will be prepped for the new tenants right after." Austin just sat there, entirely paralyzed, while Chloe frantically pulled out her phone to search for short-term corporate housing or open apartment listings. They were completely stranded by their own entitlement. While I walked out of the restaurant with my head held high, the cool night air felt incredibly refreshing, and a deep, unshakable sense of peace washed over me. My move into the downtown apartment went off without a hitch. The movers handled the heavy lifting in a couple of hours while I sat on the balcony with a cup of coffee. My new kitchen was sleek and modern. The living area was flooded with natural light, and the balcony had just enough room for the potted hydrangeas I'd brought along. For the first few weeks, I simply reveled in the absolute quiet, the freedom from demands, and the beautiful certainty that my life belonged entirely to me again. Austin texted me about a month later. They'd managed to find a smaller, significantly more expensive apartment further out in the suburbs, and they were having to tighten their belts. I sent back a polite reply, congratulating them on finding a place, but I deliberately kept my emotional distance and didn't offer a single dime of financial support. There was no grand family reconciliation, no tearful apologies from them. And I didn't need any. The clear boundaries I'd set were more than enough. Once a month. I take a drive past my old house and see the new family's kids playing tag on the front lawn. The house is full of life. The rental income hits my account like clockwork, and my retirement is completely secure. Chloe finally learned that she couldn't steamroll me, and she stays firmly in the background whenever Austin calls to check in on Sundays. I took control of my own destiny, without shouting matches, without legal battles, just through quiet, decisive action when it counted. Whenever I sit out on my balcony in the evenings watching the sun dip below the city skyline, I know I made the right call. I'm not a bystander in my own life. I'm the author of it, completely at peace, and finally right where I belong. Friends, many of you have been with Quiet Revenge for months, and some for years. We are deeply grateful for your encouragement, comments, and support. We believe meaningful stories deserve thoughtful care. Although AI tools may help with certain creative tasks, every story is carefully chosen, edited, reviewed, and produced by our team before publication. At the moment, our YouTube monetization is not active, so viewer support helps us continue sharing the stories that bring this community together, if you would like to help. Even the cost of a small cup of coffee can make a difference. Patreon https://www.patreon.com/my quiet revenge family. Kenny Coffee https://code-coffee.com/thistry family. So PayPal https://www.paypal.com/paypal में/kanhongmin. Thank you for helping Quiet Revenge remain a place where stories of courage, family, and quiet strength can continue to be heard.